Hello again. Have you ever asked yourself the question, what is the world's oldest language? The world's oldest language, is it ancient Greek or Latin or ancient Egyptian or maybe something from the other side of the world like Chinese or Tamil? These are all claims people have made throughout the years about what the oldest language is. And I've seen a lot of people talking about this online, particularly, curiously enough, about how Tamil is the world's oldest language. So I'd like to answer this question today. What is the world's oldest language? Well, if you know a little bit more about languages, I think you can see that the question of the oldest language actually doesn't really make any sense. As I've explained in previous videos, human language is an instinct. It is something which just arises, emerges out of our biology. People don't sit down and make up new rules and words and things for languages. They just evolve naturally as humans communicate together. And if you look at the history of languages, you can see that all languages change over time. I think you can tell if you're an English speaker, if you start to look at the English that was used, of course we can only today look back at writing because that was before the advent of recording audio. But if we look hundreds of years ago at the English that was spoken, it might seem very bizarre and sometimes very hard to understand. And if you look back a couple more hundred years, it eventually gets to the point where you can't understand anything at all. Like if you try to look at Old English, then you will understand nothing unless you study it separately as a separate language. The same could be true of other languages. Take French or Chinese or any language. If you start going back a few hundred years, maybe we can still understand. But if you go back far enough, you get to a point where you can't actually understand anything unless you have special training. And this is true of all languages because languages naturally evolve over time. Even today, there's words that kids use in English that I've never heard or I don't know exactly what they mean necessarily. Um, Language is constantly changing. And uh, it is this feature of language which makes it so that no language will ever be static. So it doesn't make sense really for languages to talk about a language lasting for a long time because a language is changing, and maybe we might call a language a different thing over time. Maybe what we call today English. Go back far enough, we call it Old English. Take a language like Italian today, go back far enough, we call it Latin. Go back even farther, it was maybe called something else. Um, the point I'm trying to make is that all languages exist in a continuity of time, and I would say, with some maybe rare exceptions, all languages that we see existing today have some continuity with the language that was spoken before it, all the way back to the very history of the first birth of the first language, which is probably around the same time of the birth of our species as of Homo sapiens, or even earlier than that. So we're talking about uh, tens or maybe tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, if not more. So, what is the oldest language? Well, there is no oldest language. I'm sorry to all those people who like to say online that Tamil is the oldest language spoken in the world. It's not. It doesn't make any sense. I know that some people argue, oh, well, the literary Tamil of 1,000 or 2,000 years ago is very similar to the literary Tamil of today, so it's the same language. Well, that's kind of silly, I think. The language, I'm sure if we could make a time machine and take a modern day Tamil speaker back 2,000 years to what people were speaking, if they called it Tamil then, I'm sure you wouldn't understand them at all, or very little. And the same would be true of any language. If you go back far enough in time, you'll reach a point where you don't understand what people are saying. In that sense, you could say it's now a different language. So, all languages exist on a continuity of time, and all languages didn't just appear someday. Like they didn't just say, okay, starting today, English. Here's the words, here's the rules, and this is what we're going to speak. No, English is very different from the English which was spoken maybe 500 or 700 years ago, but it exists on a continuum. It changed slowly over time, and that's that. So, to answer the question, there is no world's oldest language. All languages are connected to the past of what came before them, And at some point we say this is a different language in practical terms, even if it is maybe called by the same name. So that's all I wanted to say for today's video. If you like languages and videos on language topics and linguistics, it would be great if you could subscribe to the channel. Hope to see you again soon.